I've always felt different. I've always seen things, but when I tried to express them as a child, I was always told to ignore it.
There were people that I didn't know that came to me and said, I have this message that I keep getting that I have to deliver to you.
All of a sudden, out of the shadows, a homeless man just jumped right in front of me. And he said, I'm a soul just like you.
I love it.
I wanted to understand the universe and who and what we are and what are we doing here.
We're all part of this amazing soul wave tapping into each other.
This was a major life changer.
You are a light. You have helped me a ton. Thank you.
You've given me the courage to live more from my soul.
Millions of people are awakening.
So wake up with Michele Meiche, the place to hear the best-selling authors and experts in the fields of cutting-edge self-help, personal growth, metaphysics, and spirituality. The soul path of awakening.
Understand what living awake is.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Okay, living awake is patience. I'll explain. Those of you that have been listening for a while, you understand. All right, gang, call-in number 347-539-5122. Press 1 on your keypad if you want to say hi, talk, share, get a reading. 347-539-5122 is the call-in number. Yay! Hey, welcome if you're new here. So, as you know, we've been having challenges with BTR, Blog Talk Radio, and I have been searching for the last year, especially intensely starting January when these issues started happening, and we were on hiatus for 5 months. And it's not so easy with what I want and need, so without having to create a whole studio again, like I did at the beginning of Awakenings. So I could use your help, anybody that can help or has an idea, because I want people to be able to, I want to have the chat. I want to have people be able to call in live, listen live by phone, not have to download an app for the guests, but they don't have to download an app and open an app, because most podcasts, you have to, you got one or the other. So anyway, I'm trying to get something with as much to tide us over. I think this week I spent about 8 hours of research last week, and Monday, Tuesday, about, 3 or 4 hours of research, and just tried last night Blog Talk Radio, and then it worked. So I was like, okay, just going to go with this then. So, because otherwise what I had before, those of you that have been with Awakenings at the inception, I had recording equipment. I still have some of that. I probably have to upgrade it. But, I edited, I did everything on my own with some of my DJ friends helping, and then I had to upload to a server, and then it went on to the Cosmic Dimensions platform. So, So there are ways to do this with, getting a designated number, but I'm trying to find the easiest way. So if any of you know something or can help out, it will be greatly appreciated. Lots happening. So if you're in the U.S., I did predict this Trumpy getting in. Mr. Trumpy, I said, because of Vance. So this morning, or late last night, I had certain clients and people texting me, you were right, your prediction was right. So, hey, Tasha in the chat, hello. I'm just going with it. I don't know what to do, guys, because I want to find the right combination of features and obviously the consistency. I don't know what's going on with Blog Talk Radio. They were bought by iHeart, and iHeart also owns Spreaker, which I think this platform is actually Spreaker. I mean, I've been on this platform for many, many years, and it was never like this. So I have no idea, and they don't know, or they just say, oh, we don't know, we're working on it. The engineers are working on it. The engineers are working on it. It should be working next time, or it's working if you upload, but it's the live feature that I want with call-in, chat, and audio, because I'm going to keep the video when we move to YouTube. I'm keeping that separate. So anyway, if any of you have any suggestions or hacks on this, or can help me research this, or help me do any of this, or you know anyone that can, please let me know. Okay, you can email me, awakeningspodcast@gmail.com, info@soulplayground.life as well. So are you guys feeling the shifty energy, the shifting? I want to say, even though, and I'm going to get to callers, 347-539-5122. I just want to thank everyone that's sticking with the challenges and been very encouraging, and it's great. So we're just in some kind of interesting transition that I know it's all going to work out even better than I could orchestrate it in with my little mind, my lower mind, my beta consciousness, my little self. But I've really never had this kind of situation happening where the options aren't really there fully. They haven't totally revealed, and yet the old isn't totally over, but isn't working completely, consistently. And so that's life right now. That's part of the chaos. So really one of the things that I wanted to share, and then we're going to get to callers, 347-539-5122 is the call-in number. If you have a question, comment, or you want a reading, press 1. The thing that's coming up, and I can even use it in the situation I'm going through with the podcasting, the recording and audio software. And by the way, people sometimes they email, StreamYard, you can use Riverside FM, but they don't have designated phone numbers, right? And then also people can't use a phone to call in. You have to have a link, and then you can only have so many people. I mean, sometimes we have 50-plus people listening in the queue and answering and asking questions, right? So there's a limit on that. So anyway, but part of what's going on, and to me this is a really good example of how not to get caught up in the distraction. And sometimes distractions are not just what's going on with other people or social media or the world, but in your own life. When we're changing, and I did a post about this, about the change point. A change point is very interesting. It's a particular point in the cycle of life, or the soul spiral, the spiral of the soul, right? Where you're at a similar point that you've been before, but with different options and usually things that you're not seeing or aware of yet. So something is coming out. It's a reference point. Something is leaving your life because you've shifted enough, internally, energetically, emotionally. There's a new awareness, a new understanding that has to be lived out. So it's a point of reference that it could look like stillness. It could look like nothing is happening. It could look like confusion. It can look like a lot of different things. And if you extended that into 4D reality, right, you would see that the point, like a period, is not just a dot. There's a lot more happening underneath the surface and above, right? It's spatial. There's a lot happening to the left or the past, and there's to the right or the future. And so it's like a well that you can't see. You see the surface, it looks like a puddle, but underneath it's a deep well. So right now at the change point, and I think I talked about this on my Instagram post about the inner circle is changing. Which, by the way, after I did that post about the inner circle last week. I had a nice tutorial with the guides in meditation and getting information of what's coming. And so I did a few reels. I probably have about 10, maybe 20 reels that I'm going to be posting, all little bits of the information I receive. So I can see that list. And I think next week our guest, Neil Pontero, let me see, when did I do this post about the circle? It was just funny because he posted something about the inner circle. I'm noticing people posting similar things. And when that happens, to me, we're all tapping into something. We're starting to say the same thing. those of us that are similar resonance or same soul group, we're picking up what's coming, and we're sharing it, in different ways. So I kind of got a tickle of that because after I posted it and I saw it, I don't know what he said about it, but he came up in my feed afterwards. Let's see, when was this? When did I do this post? Anyway, or when did I do the original? Because it was after I went to the I had been walking. I did my walk that I normally do. So it had to be around, I don't know, last Friday or something, or over the weekend. Yeah, and then I posted Monday. Yeah, so I look for those. Those are confirmations, you guys. Those are, it may not be exactly the same, but it's tapping into that zeitgeist. It's tapping into the morphogenic field or the resonant fields of consciousness as to your position in time, that change point. In other words, people are going to get different messages, even out of the same reading. You're going to get different messages depending on what you're meant to do or what you're meant to work on. This is why it's so important to understand your soul. This is why I started the Patreon Soul Awakening community, because different messages depending on where you're at and what you need to do, what your soul's purpose is, what you're meant to do here. So it's somebody else might have a different meaning or get maybe they have learning lessons and they're going to get caught up in the drama. Maybe, you know what I'm saying? And maybe that's there, or maybe they're working through learning lesson relationships, but you're not there. So you're not going to get exactly the same messages. Or if you do, you may not resonate with it or pick up on it, vibe on it, or feel a connection to it. It may pass you. A lot of you know that when I first started working with the guides, I had no idea where did you come from. They were in my healing room. I could see them visually. And I'm like, who are you? What is going on here? I actually said, who the hell are you? Just like I said to Ashtar Command, who the hell are you? What's going on here? And it only was until I read it in this book that I had that I didn't, I'm going to be honest with you, I could not understand what was in that book when I first got it. The Alice Bailey book. I got to only page 8 and I earmarked it. And I said, oh, this is bullshit. What the hell is this? And I'm like, why did this person, a teacher that I was working with, was in obviously advanced metaphysics that were too advanced for me at the time, in esoteric studies, and I had been doing healing work at White Eagle Lodge and working with the Great White Brotherhood, which is of light, not about skin color, it's about light, and doing a lot of sacred circles, and anyway, and just really doing a lot of deep esoteric work and apprenticing. And I had that book, I don't know, for a few years. For some reason, I didn't toss it. In all my moves, I kept the book for some reason, in my library. And I had quite an extensive library at the time. But I was so challenged and so perplexed and curious and like, who the hell is coming in, giving me all this information and telling me this person's going to come see you, and then they see you, and they come to me. It cracked my world open when these guides came. I was already doing psychic work and channeling and everything, but as you know, I had a whole other also career going. And I was like, what in the heck is going on? And so I searched everywhere. I asked questions. I looked online. I asked people. I described what I was experiencing. Oh, I don't know. What? That's weird. That's interesting, Michelle. What is that? And then I thought, well, God, maybe it's in that book. And I was able to read the book cover to cover, and I understood it. I understood everything, not just intellectually, but on a deep emotional, feeling, visceral level. And it was like everything opened. And we talk about that metaphysically, that we don't see what we can't see due to where we are vibrationally, where we are in our understanding and our learning, our formatting. It's blocked. That's why they say that, esoterically, those that have ears to hear, eyes to see. And it's eyes and hearing that is beyond the physical eyes and the physical hearing with the ear. You're hearing and seeing psychically. You're getting the download, the transmission of all that, information, energy, lifetimes, all that have come before you. And so that whole lip to ear, that esoteric wisdom, it's still very much in play, and that's very much how I work, but also things can be right under people's noses and they don't see it. They don't see the truth. They don't see the fullness. They don't get the psychic information or the vision because vibrationally they're not there yet, or they're not formatted to receive that information. That's another thing. A lot of it has to do with, your formatting. And then after the formatting, what are you ready? What can you see? What are you ready to see? What have you developed? And I'll tell you, a big thing that blocks people from seeing is unhealed wounding. That's why I'm big on emotional clearing, repatterning, getting out of those conditioned response patterns, the protection mechanisms of the surface mind, the lower mind, the ego, consciousness. It doesn't matter how much outward temporal power you amass, whether through money or influence, it's empty, what we call in ritual work. It's empty ritual. It does not affect change. So it's possible to have a lot of temporal power, and this is what we know through certain spiritual disciplines and even religions. They talk a lot about temporal power. But temporal power is not what causes evolution and change within us and within the universe. That's why esoteric wisdom, spirituality, spiritualism, and understanding that is so powerful. And that's why certain groups and certain individuals fear that. And that's why it was kept out of religions. That's why the esoteric aspect was kept out of Judaism. It was Kabbalah, that was X'd out. The Christian mysticism, that was X'd out because, it's like, oh, you got to have this mediator and you can only know this or that. You can't be psychic. You can't get your own visions. You can't understand energy. But the thing is, that is your birthright. That is your soul right to create and live and experience from that place. And that's what we're awakening to or reawakening to. Let's get to callers. Let's see who's on the line here. Let's see. Hello, you're on air. Hello. Caller 1, can you hear me? Okay. Let's see. You're unmuted, but, yeah, okay. All right, so I've unmuted you, but okay. Anyone else calling in, please press 1 on the keypad. I'm trying to get, let's see, is this not? Tasha and Laura in the chat, can you hear me? Okay, I'm trying to pick up callers. Okay, I'll go to the next caller then. Okay, great, Laura, thank you. Hi, you're on air. Hello?
Oh, hi, Michelle.
You're on air.
Are you able to hear me?
I can hear you. Cool. Yeah.
So I'm not sure what's happened, but I was intended to be your guest for the show today. So I've been on hold for about 30 minutes. I wasn't sure if your producer let you know I was waiting or not.
No, you don't. The guest comes on at 12:45. Is this Christine?
Yes, that's me. Yeah, I've been on since 12:45.
12:19 right now.
Oh, okay. We got our time zones mixed up then.
Okay, that's okay. Well, you're here now, and I also had a different number for you, a 403.
Yes, I did. I sent them this one as well. Would you like me to call back in a bit? I can do that. That's no problem.
Let me just give me a couple minutes. I'm going to see. We had a couple callers. Just hold on. We had a couple people in the queue. Let me see if they come up, and then I'll get back. I'll get right to you. So if you just hold, because I don't know.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Okay, cool. All right, Christine. Look forward to it. Okay, talk to you in a minute. Hi, you're on air. Hello. Okay, well, I think we're going to get to our guest then, because a lot of you are listening by phone. That's cool. If you did want to have a question or comment, press 1, so I see the hand. Some of you I've clicked on, and maybe you're just listening and you didn't mean to put the hand up. But anyway, let's go to our guest, Dr. Christine Gibson, author of the Modern Trauma Toolkit. Ooh, perfect discussion for the emotional repatterning. Hey, hello again.
Hi. Yeah, I'm so sorry about the mix-up. I just looked back through
12:45 because I get
emails,
on at 12.
And yes, it did say Pacific. So no, that was totally on me, just mixing it up.
That's okay. Well, it's working out. Anyway, let's chat because, by the way, with your book, The Modern Trauma Toolkit, I just touched upon, and I've talked a lot about on this podcast, wounding, emotional wounding, patterning, condition response patterns, trauma bonding, how important it is really to not only become aware, 80% of change is awareness, but really to get on that healing path, of wholeness or empowerment and growth. So anyway, with that said, love to hear a little bit about you. And then, okay, we do have callers. You guys are, okay. We may take calls. Let's just see what's going on here. So if you just share a little bit about yourself, and then we can touch on this Modern Trauma Toolkit.
Sure, yeah, I'd love to. So I'm Christy. I'm a family doctor in Western Canada, and I've done a lot of different work in medicine, but it wasn't until I was caught in the earthquakes in Nepal in 2015. I was working in the Kathmandu Valley, and I started to experience some post-traumatic symptoms myself, and I started to look into, well, what's happening? Why am I so jittery all the time? And, if a garage door would open, I would kind of jump. And the more that I studied trauma, the more that I recognized that almost all of my patients were manifesting physical and psychological symptoms related to past traumatic experience, and I hadn't learned anything about it. So I took about 8 years now to just study everything I could about trauma so that I could help them in a different way. And now I don't even really do a lot of family medicine anymore because just trauma therapy is so crucial to helping people recover both their mind, body, spiritual health. And so, yeah, that's where the Modern Trauma Toolkit came from. So I'm on TikTok as TikTok Trauma Doc, so some of your listeners might have seen me there. And I'm just trying to get the word out and get lots of tools into people's hands to help them regulate their nervous system and get on the path to post-traumatic growth.
Wow, that is, well, to me, partially, very relevant now, always relevant, but even more now with the challenges that we have as a society and how it's affected groups and families and individuals and perhaps even whole neighborhoods and societies. Trauma response, we're in this loss process that creates a certain trauma, that creates, a post-traumatic stress syndrome. But yet, because we're in this phase of uncertainty and this growth and change, this change point individually and collectively with very dynamic aspects of our life and living changing, it's like a re-traumatizing. I see it in my practice as well. A lot of people, and I use hypnotherapy and some other things that I use to EMDR and other things to work. And having had trauma myself, I understand it because a lot of times it doesn't have. You see it later. You see it months to years. A lot of times, about 18 months later, when the organism, the person is trying to, reestablish and re-regulate, getting some centering, it rears its head. So as you probably know, a lot of times trauma, in a way, can get worse once we get stabilized. It's like getting sick. It's like, now I can relax. Now I can, right? It comes up. So in saying that, I think it's so important because I feel like a lot of people forget, I'm okay now. I'm over that, or I'm over what happened, or, I'm moving on, Then the symptoms start coming up.
Yeah.
Right?
And I don't think people are really aware of what those symptoms could look like because sometimes people aren't sure that they've experienced trauma, and I think it's hard to argue that anybody on the planet hasn't at this point after the politics of division and the climate emergency and the pandemic and just so many big things that we've had to face, as you said a few minutes ago, collectively. Yeah. So people aren't really recognizing how their mind, body, spirit has responded or even collapsed sometimes in the face of these really big challenges. And then, of course, everything they're going through individually. So I find that even the word trauma, not everyone resonates with, but once we start talking, they'll say, oh, gosh, yeah, me too.
Yeah. Yeah, it does have a stigma a lot. And I find people, I'm over it, or I need to, I'm fine. I just, I had someone the other day said, I just journaled and I'm good, I'm okay. But clearly they weren't. And I'm like, well, sometimes there's more things to do. Like also you have to pull yourself out of something sometimes. You have to take that rest or respite or do a healthy distraction, something nurturing, something, a funny movie, comedian or something, other than sometimes just processing. But let's go over, if we could, some of the symptoms or what you've been seeing and some of the key things people could look out for, and then perhaps a way to address.
There's kind of two different ways that I think about symptoms. So one is the common kind of language that we all use related to trauma, which is people go into fight and flight. And that is when you have an overactive response and you're feeling really restless in your mind and tense in the body because it wants you to move. But what less people are aware of is the freeze collapse end of it, which is when your active nervous system gets so overwhelmed that it just shuts down. And so the first one shows up as just general restlessness and tension and lots of movement-related symptoms. So everything feels busy and hard to turn the brain off. They're overthinking. Lots of people have a high heart rate, just trying to tell them to run away from their problems. But what less people recognize is that freeze collapse is the other end of that spectrum. And that's when you can't get out of bed and can't get off your couch because you're doom scrolling. And I think a lot of people don't recognize that this is one of the other ways your nervous system manifests a trauma response. And they just think, maybe I'm depressed, or this is just me. Like, I can't do very much. I've lost all my energy. Sometimes that's true, and sometimes you need to, have a medical consultant figure out what's happening. But for a lot of us, it's a trauma response.
Yeah. And I think to your point with the trauma response is, and I'll be honest, I think I've said this before when we've had other guests on that are in similar fields, is that this is kind of like when mindfulness or meditation or taking time out, whatever that is, or pause, is no longer luxury. It's self-care. This is part of caring for yourself and understanding yourself, self-love, whatever. I feel like the upcoming changes that we have, we're going to need to know that and understand, and not this mentality or mindset of powering through. We especially on the Western world, we have this culture of just power through it, make it happen, the overriding, constantly overriding. Whether we're overriding the body or we're overriding the mind, we're overriding. And I know over the years I have learned, I've seen obviously with my clients, but I have learned even on myself, is that when I can pull back realistically in whatever way, depending on my schedule, that whatever I needed to do somehow gets done or wasn't as important, and I then have the true energy and focus to handle that situation. But there is this power of, I've had enough, I've done enough, I have to shift gears here right now. And then that recuperation phase, if you give yourself that, because I'm seeing a lot of people are just so stretched. There's so much information and experiences to process just in life in general, right? And then now we're talking about the times that we're in. There is a bit of overload. I don't know if you're sensing that or experiencing that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because of this overload, it's harder to really recognize what it is that's happening. So you just go from thing to thing to thing without taking the time to notice. So in the Modern Trauma Toolkit, I kind of talk about a 3-step pathway to resetting this response. And the first step is noticing. So you really nailed it, Michelle. Like that is the thing, is to notice. Yeah. And it's taking the time out to decide, is my nervous system in something we call the window of tolerance? Like, am I able to cope with what's in front of me? Can I feel like I'm handling most things? And when that answer is no, generally people are, like I mentioned, either overactive or underactive. And then that second step is processing to get back into your window. And that was what I hadn't understood, is just how many ways there are to do it. Like, there is, of course, formal therapy. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned you do EMDR. I have many, many tools in my toolkit too, but there's so many other things that people can do, and so much of it is in their grasp. Like, there's creative forms of expression, there's ways of being in nature, there's pink noise apps on your phone that can help your brain remodulate. And that's what I didn't understand as a doctor, because we don't learn these tools. And frankly, now that I'm aware of them, I think it is the most important medicine of these times.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the thing. And I tell the people I work with, you got to do stuff in between, because it's not enough. A session or one thing, like, I meditate, that's not enough. Sometimes you need to do multiple things, or it is that walk. The other day, because I went to the UK facilitating a couple workshops, and I had so much on. I mean, I knew I was going to be in overload because I'm preparing to leave and doing the work and getting things done before I left, and then getting things done for where I'm going, right? And I think it was the day of, I just kind of felt that what you talked about, the overactive, and I was like, having trouble, like, what should I do now? What's the next thing? Because I had so much. And I stopped myself in the middle of my house. That's it. Go walk, get your cortado. And I did. I walked. I went to this cafe that I love. I put my feet up on one of the chairs there, and I just looked at the trees and the cars passing by, and I just took that time for myself. And then a meeting that I did there, instead of doing it back in my office. And I really now I had the time, obviously, to do that, but I really I knew, Michelle, there's just so much crammed right now in your mind, and you can't process. You can't even, journaling wouldn't do it. For me, walking or being in nature really helps me. And it's immediate shift when I do that. And I'm a big meditator. I have a book on meditation. I'm into mindfulness, but sometimes that just doesn't cut it. I mean, sometimes I think just one foot in front of the other and looking at the trees and saying hi to people if you're around, right?
Well, and I think you can do mindful walking too. Like, for some people, if you say you should meditate, they're like, I don't want to spend time alone with my brain, thank you. So meditation doesn't work for lots of folks, especially when they have a really restless brain that's thinking like negative thoughts. So I love to prescribe like mindful walking, mindful doing the dishes, mindful brushing your teeth. There's lots of ways to be present in a moment without having to like music clean the slate and try to relax when your body isn't ready.
Yeah. I find music, I mean, I call them, we always talk about negative triggers, but there's also positive triggers, that essential oil, that aromatherapy, incense, certain music, opening windows. I think part of what I'm hearing you saying when you said earlier, like, there's so many ways, and I do agree. I feel like I love journaling. I love processing. I think that's great. I think sessions, therapy, we're all of that. But I think sometimes we get so caught up in that, and that won't do it. Sometimes I think that's a good thing to know how to do. But I think, to your point, that there's so many other things that just naturally shift us out, because we don't always know why we're feeling what we're feeling. The trauma, it may be diffused, and sometimes people are trying to poke around too much that it has to be this, it has to be that, when we can do that positive or life-enhancing distraction, that mindfulness or that other activity, and it automatically shifts. We go into homeostasis. Our body-mind naturally wants to shift if we just nudge it. So in saying that,
I love how you said that. This is why.
Tell me, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Well, no, I want you to say your point, but then also what should people be looking at to that point? What do you see? Because like you're saying and I'm saying, like, there's so many ways to do this, but how do we, I guess, see that or start, utilizing all these different ways that we have at our disposal? Is it looking at things differently? Is it a mindset?
Well, and it is really hard to look at things differently when your thinking brain isn't working. So what people often don't realize is that when trauma responses have taken over, it's a reflex, and you don't actually have a lot of control over it. So part of that noticing is getting your nervous system back into the window where you feel like you can handle things, and then your thinking brain is available again. So a lot of people feel like they could, or they should, be able to think their way through this. And a lot of times it starts in the body. And that's why in the Modern Trauma Toolkit, I really focus on body-based practices and things I had never heard of as a physician. But as I explored trauma and the different ways to clear it, I was just so impressed with techniques like tapping or self-acupressure, with tremoring, how you release the psoas muscle deep inside the core of the body. So much of us hold tension in our hips and pelvis and stomach area. So in the book, I'll teach things like soothing touch, havening, tapping, tremoring. Like, there's a whole chapter plus a 20-minute video on each of those practices. So I just think every single person should know this stuff. Like, parents should know, and teachers should know, and definitely doctors should know. But this should just be in the general things that we learn as humans, is the way to release all of this stuck energy. And we can't clear it with the brain because the brain isn't working. We have to clear it with the nervous system first and then be able to access the brain again.
Yeah. To that point, I have self-hugs, swaying, figure eights, or just swaying back and forth or side to side, those soothing techniques, rubbing from the shoulders, the arms, that kind of, we really need to get that out. This is so good, because it's like things that maybe other people do for you or to you to help soothe, but sometimes you don't have someone there. You need to do it. You need to do it yourself. I like that you're doing more.
Well, and sometimes you're the only person you could consider trusting. I mean, there's a lot of people who have these core wounds of shame or core wounds of trust, and it doesn't really work to do it with other people. So one of the reasons why I wanted to get the book out is to just say, like, you're not alone. Even though you're figuring this out on your own, you're not alone. There's lots of us trying to make our way through, and there are lots of different things that you can do by yourself to shift back into that window where you can handle stuff again.
Gosh. That is so powerful. Creating that space. So really, part of what I'm hearing you say is, and again, I would say that awareness is like that 80% of any change or healing or growth or empowerment, and the 20 is the, once you're aware, is the, effort or persistent movement or motion or activity or action. What helps people raise their awareness? I guess that's the one thing I would say, Christine, by everything that you're saying, because even talking to you, I'm just kind of scanning things in my mind, how many things we do have at our disposal, but we're not taught. We're taught to kind of figure it out by the mind, but you're right, the mind is like, it's checking out, it's overloaded, it's stretched. So what are some key points? How can we maybe look around at our life? Is that part of the mindfulness of the awareness of what actually puts us back in that window, as you call it?
And for some people, their thinking brains are available enough that they can say, oh, I'm stuck in fight and flight, or I'm stuck in freeze collapse. But for some people, their thinking brains don't know. And I love to use metaphor. Like, I really believe metaphor and imagery are the language of the subconscious. And so I'll say, if your mind-body system were a faucet, how hard would the water be running? Would it be pouring out full bore, filling the sink like a fire hose, or would it be a trickle?
Right.
Just check in with your body and decide where your faucet is. And then using metaphor, they might be able to say, oh yeah, it's blasting out, it's really uncomfortable, or gosh, it's a trickle, I can barely feel it. And then I'll know that's how your nervous system is, like you're in overactive or underactive state. A bicycle metaphor works too. Like there's lots of different ways that people can tap in if they're not able to recognize if they're in fight, fright, or freeze. And I also love the use of metaphor and imagery in healing, because there are so many ways that we can actually create imaginal experiences. Like there's great research showing that if you can imagine something in your mind, it's almost like you experience that exact thing.
Yeah.
And so having a safe place or a compassionate person in your imagination is an incredible healing tool that we're all capable of.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And to your point, that's why so much, it's, if you have a certain condition, don't watch this movie, or don't go here in this ride. And it's because, yes, your mind doesn't know the difference. Is this actually happening? Or, it is happening. If you're viewing it, if you're envisioning it, if you're experiencing the scary movie, it is happening. So it seems that part of what I'm hearing you say, in a way, you kind of have to, again, I'm going to go back to the pause, to perhaps the contemplation or observing, kind of have to know how you respond, it sounds like, by what you're saying. You kind of have to know your body, mind. I'm saying that because that's what's helped me. So it sounds like that's what you're saying, because some people may not know they're in the trauma response. Right?
I find a lot of people don't. Like, it's not something, people think either you have PTSD or nothing. And there's so much in between. And I honestly think, given what's in the collective, that so much of us have. And then the other piece that people don't recognize is that we carry the traumas of our ancestors. And so if there's a community of like First Nations people or, Black Americans, of course you can trace the trauma through your lineage, but it's so remarkable to think of how many of us hold it in that way. So like my background is Ukrainian and Scottish. And it wasn't until, maybe the last 10 years that I started to recognize just how much trauma was in my lineage. And we carry that. There's a mechanism called epigenetics where our DNA actually changes. It methylates based on the traumatic experiences we encounter, but also how our body responds to those. Because you can have different people who've encountered the same problem, like, for example, an earthquake or even family dynamics, and they will respond in really different ways. And so trauma isn't the event. Trauma is your individual response to that event. And part of that response can permanently change your DNA and get passed down. And so some people might say, like, I had a perfectly easy childhood. I don't understand why I'm always so anxious and afraid of everything, and I feel like bad things are going to happen to me. or I carry this core wound of shame. I just don't feel like I'm good enough. It wasn't yours. It belongs to your ancestors. And that's why I love the use of metaphor, is because through metaphor, you can leave it behind. And even within my book, I have exercises on that. But I don't think enough people recognize that we carry this legacy burden too.
Yeah, the ancestral healing or generational transmission. I think more and more people are becoming more aware of that. It's especially kind of in more alternative circles. The one thing that I'm hearing you say, and I kind of agree, though, I feel like it's talked about brushing your teeth. I feel like what we're talking about, and it sounds like what you're putting in your book, that this is maintenance. It's not something that just goes away. It's not just one time and you're done. It's like this is part of life and living, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think everyone needs to have a routine. Like for me, I learned how to do tremoring so that I can release all of this like sympathetic tone or this like extra energy that's in my core. And I know when I need it. I can actually say, oh gosh, like it's feeling really tense. I'm going to need to tremor in the next day or two. And it's the same thing with something like tapping. I always say to people, it's like if you can start to gauge your emotions, Deb Dana calls this befriending your nervous system. And so when you feel like there is too much sadness or too much fear, as therapists, we always rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. But I also say, is it small, medium, or large? Like if you're experiencing large, then let's use one of these tools to get it down to a small, and then you can feel like you can manage it. And it's not to say that emotions are bad. They're all messages, and they're all important. Yeah. But sometimes they just get too much. So I like to say, what if you had a giant volume dial and you could just turn that volume down and get it to a manageable level so that it wasn't making you feel paralyzed. And I love tapping for that. It's such a great tool. And I had never understood, the science behind self-acupuncture, or acupressure. There's great research on it now. It's like a medically indicated treatment for anxiety and cravings and pain and so many different things. And I always like to say, let's choose a natural alternative to something like a medication, and then get the power in your hands.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting with tapping, or even just tapping the pointer finger and middle finger on the wrist of the left, tapping in messages, releasing and tapping in. That meridian goes right to the brain. I think it also goes to the liver. I'm not sure. I have an acupuncturist client that had told me, but, one of the reasons, that it works. But to your point, it's like, it's a toolkit. And I so agree, because this is why I think you try different things and you see what works. And then certain times you're going to need this or that, or this helps. Like for me, if I know that I'm going into a time when a lot is going on, I have certain foods I'll eat, certain supplements that I take, certain teas, even certain teacups, coffee cups, teacups, because when I use them, there's certain ones that are during the day when I'm working, then I have one at night when I certain tea, and then that cup, it just automatically, it's like putting your sweats on. You get home, it's like you've been out and about, or you've been on speaking engagement or doing workshops, and you put those cozies on. And I think it's self-regulating and self-soothing. I just think it's, maybe the thing is that we need to understand that it's a way of life, and to your point, it's a toolkit. It's not just one thing or one or two things, and that I think somebody in the chat had put cognizance rather than awareness. Yeah, I like that. The cognizance, to be have that cognitive awareness and understanding that, I am going through this. Let me support myself. Let me be there, because I don't know if you've seen this. I'm telling you, I've traveled a lot. I've lived in Europe. Europeans have it a bit less than we do, and definitely in some of the South American countries. We in the state now. I don't know Canada because I know that's where you are. We have this kind of stealing through. This making it happen, the grind. I'm doing, and it's like this constantly press. Even there was that book, lean into it, everything's, and there's so much about that. Or I have friends I got this done because I had all this coffee and I made it happen. Or now I'm relaxing. Why? It's like, mm-hmm. I don't know how, you just see what I'm saying? I don't know if you have that, if you've seen that where you are, if that's part of the mindset as well in Canada, but we definitely have that in the States, that it's constantly this pushing between the body-mind to do more, to make it happen.
Yeah, we're definitely infused with that hustle and grind culture here too. I just came back from Europe myself, and lazing around the streets of Portugal, is such a different experience than what we're in here. We definitely have a hustle culture. I loved what you said too about that kind of introducing that coziness. One of the chapters in my book involves Ayurvedic practice because I'm also an Ayurvedic counselor, and so when you study the Vedic texts, they will talk about things like a dinacharya, like your daily routine, where they will recommend every morning and evening you massage oil, and certain kinds of oil, depending on, like you mentioned, the essential oils will be different, but some of them will invoke stillness and some of them will invoke movement. And so you have to be in touch with your nervous system to know which is the oil that you would use that day. And massaging an oil into your hands and your face, and it's that really deliberate moment of self-care, and that's a part of the daily routine. And so when they talk about how you might organize your day, you're supposed to pay attention to, am I overactive in my movement energy? They call that vata. Or am I overactive in my still energy? That's called kapha. And when I started studying it, it matched so perfectly to a modern theory called the polyvagal theory. And it was so incredible to think that this 10,000-year-old texts are still being translated and researched now, and we just use modern words in polyvagal theory. But when I introduced the chapter on polyvagal, it was so interesting to think they completely relate to these mental states that were mentioned in these Vedic texts so many thousands of years ago. And humans have known that we have these different states of our mind and body. So in the Ayurvedic language, you would call it a sattvic mind when you're in that equilibrium. And in polyvagal theory, they call that ventral vagal, and it basically just means your vagus nerve is in a really calm space, and you can engage socially with others, and you're feeling safe and calm. And then in the Vedic text, you would have a rajasic energy or tamasic energy, depending if you're overactive or underactive in your mind. And that matches perfectly with polyvagal theory.
That's active as well, right? Rajasic is active. That's a red energy.
Rajasic is active, and tamasic is still. Yeah.
It's still. Okay, that's right. Okay.
And just how amazing is it that 10,000 years ago in Sanskrit, they were writing about this, and we're still figuring it out. We're still attaching new names and new labels and new therapies to it, but it's been in our lexicon for centuries, and we actually sometimes need to tap into this ancient wisdom practices. Like breath, for example. When we studied Ayurvedic counseling, they taught us to prescribe different breath patterns depending on the energy balance of the person. And I totally combine that with Western breath work. I'll say, now I understand that when you take an inhale, you're activating your sympathetic nervous system. And when you exhale, you're activating your parasympathetic. So I don't teach box breathing. I'll say, tune in. Where is your faucet? Do you need more energy or less energy? Do we need to add it to your body or release it from your body? And then that's how you would choose your breathing pattern. And then I can teach them different styles. So I definitely include all of this in the modern trauma toolkit, just to say, breath is the most accessible thing that we all have. And you can dip into it in so many different ways. And for some people, it might be this Western science perspective. And for others, it might be Ayurvedic. And for still others, it might just be really tuning in to their own needs.
Yeah, it's that awareness of that. I do the polyvagal breath. I do that a lot, working with that. Oh, it's interesting because what you're saying in true, actually yoga, and meditation, and true meditation integrates breath work. It is very individual to the person, whether it's their mind, the emotional body going, the mental, or the physical. What's their predominance? They in the Eastern tradition, true Eastern traditions. That's how they teach. Not everybody gets the same meditation. Not everybody gets the same breath work, depending on their constitution. Exactly. So I love that you bring that. Yeah, I love that you bring that in.
And that's why the tagline for my book is personalize your practice. Like, I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all thing. I'm not going to say to everybody, oh, you need to do self-acupressure and you need to do it in this way. So much of it is personalizing your toolkit and figuring out what works for you. And it is different for everybody. And sometimes it's different for a body in a given week or a given month. So it's always tuning in and then figuring it out. So you mentioned polyvagal breathing. One of the things I love to teach people is to make polyvagal playlists. So make a music playlist when you're feeling overactive and you need to interrupt that. And it's a movement-based practice where you would have a kitchen dance party and let yourself release all of this extra sympathetic energy. But you also make a playlist when you're in your vagal state and you've got too much parasympathetic on board. And then your playlist would just help you with really, really gentle movement. So a lot of the different things that you would naturally do in a day, like listening to music, you can actually tune into your nervous system and give it what it needs.
Yeah, that's so key. That tuning into the nervous system, which, by the way, as you already know, though, but for our listeners, I mean, that's also the communication highway, and especially at the spinal column, that's the switchboard. That's the switchboard for us. So it's so important. One of the things I'm really taking away from you, Christine, that I'm almost like, gosh, how obviously you're doing talks and you're getting on, podcasts and radio programs, et cetera, which is great. But what you're doing is so important, and it hasn't been done enough, and I know myself included, but other practitioners that have been in, wellness or alternative therapies or holistic or complementary have been trying to personalize. It just, the idea of individualizing and also to some degree it's a form of individuation, that personalizing, it just hasn't had the voice or the place on the shelf, the bookshelf, so to speak. I don't know if it's because people get overly formulaic. I would say formulas are good. They get you there, but then you have to individualize. You have to personalize them, like to your point, not just because to a person, but to different times in our life or different days or whatever we're going through. And it also kind of tickles me because to me what you're saying is so aligned with the evolutionary process we're in, even if we looked at it through an astrological lens with Pluto going to Aquarius, it's all about the individual or individuating as well. But taking systems and programs and saying, well, is it right for me? My health care, my this or my that, and self-responsibility. Because a lot of what you're saying, you have to become accountable, responsible for yourself to understand what you need, right? I mean, that's what I have found anyway.
Yeah, I agree with that to some extent, but I also think some people really need to find community. So part of the book in the Modern Trauma Toolkit is I talk about, like, what are the group solutions that we can come to? And sometimes it's like making structural changes because trauma isn't necessarily always an individual thing. Sometimes trauma can be racism or sexism or any kinds of ways that the system hurts people. I mean, it could be your job. And sometimes an individual can't make the changes, or they're just going to be constantly re-traumatized every day. And so sometimes we need community-level solutions too. So, yes, and I think we need to individualize, but we also need to invoke community, because
is you have to, more than what I was meaning about accountability and self-responsibility is that you have to check in with yourself. Not so much, I agree, community is great, we need that, and groups and all that, and support. But also, you have to check in with yourself to see, what do I need? What do I really need, or what am I going through?
Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes that takes a bit, though it sounds like, with a, kind of a toolkit or a book, at least if you have the beginning, that's kind of what I'm sussing out by what you're, saying in the premise of your book. At least if people start getting the message, it could be more things. It could be some, it could be A, B, or C, or these are options. Or, because honestly, I don't know about you. I mean, you've been speaking about this, you wrote the book, but from what I have seen in my world and my practice and my travels, is a lot of people don't even sit down and go, what, they don't even know there's options, or what do I need? It's more like, well, I should get through this. I should be able to do this. I should be able, this isn't too busy. Why can't I do this right now? Or, or I should be able to focus on this now. Why am I not, instead of like this whole, and that's where I mean the accountability or self-responsibility of almost like what people would maybe do even for a child or a friend, like reaching out and going, well, maybe right now just a cup of tea and a chat is great, and then you take a break and then you can get back to it. So I don't know how to get that mindset, because I am definitely seeing everything that you're saying, but it's like, how do you get the people to pause and go, maybe I need to do some other things?
One of the things that I've been noticing, especially in the last 5-10 years, is what's missing before self-accountability is self-compassion and feeling like you deserve it. Feeling like this is something that belongs to you, and it was just, as a human in this world, it is your right to feel differently. And so a lot of people believe I was born into this hustle and grind culture, and I'm just stuck here. And so to have them find the self-compassion to say, no, you deserve to feel good. You deserve to believe that you are good enough. You deserve, nobody's happy all the time, but you deserve joy. You deserve pleasure. And so I love to start with self-compassion as kind of grounding. So one of my favorite tools is something called affirmations. So the difference between an affirmation and an affirmation is you're just sticking a what if in front of it. But for a lot of people, if they were to use affirmations and say things like, I deserve to be happy, I could be safe, they're not really feeling it because they don't believe it yet. And sometimes that can feel like you're gaslighting yourself. So all you need to do is stick a what if in front of it and say, what if I deserve good things? What if I could be safe? What if that's something that is possible for me? And that what if just really softens it so that they believe in possibility. Because the opposite of trauma isn't a different singular pathway of being happy all the time. The opposite of trauma is flexibility. And so trying to get people to believe that more than one thing is possible for them is the key.
I love that. Yeah, the self-compassion and the what if. It's a little similar to the why not me, well, other people do it, why not me, but it's a little bit more, it's a little bit more heart-centered, which is nice.
Yeah, I love the affirmations. I think it's such a beautiful practice, and many people resonate with it. And some people love affirmations, and then we just go with that. But for others, the affirmations are just softer and gentler. Yeah,
I like that. And I love that before the responsibility, the compassion, that so resonates. That, that softening 'cause I don't know about you, but some of my biggest changes or leaps or levels of abundance or drawing something in or getting something done that I didn't think I could do came from that self-compassion of done, can't do it, shift, do something else, go, and just letting it go. And I'm not, the caveat, not procrastination, but sometimes I do think procrastination is our higher self intervening, because sometimes we're so overly scheduled or have this unrealistic expectation of what we need to do. But I have found that peace, and that's something I've had to learn more about, is that self-compassion, believe it or not. But I have found when I've been able to really go there, somehow it ends up better than I thought. Than when I was, which is kind of interesting. It's kind of an interesting.
This is like the most non-scientific answer, but to me, it's all about flow. Like, I know when I'm in flow, and I know when the universe is telling me that I'm going in the right direction. And it was funny because, like, for me to study all these different therapies and different tools, I felt like I was drinking from a fire hose for years and years and years. And, like, I would learn of one, and I'd have to start exploring it, and I just felt this, like, compelled to do it. And then it slowed right down, and the universe was like, okay, there's enough. Get it out there. And I felt like there was such strong signaling, and I can now tune into that better. So I do think a lot of people can be more aware of when they're in flow. And I think when you're stuck in the trauma responses, it interrupts your flow.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, and there's trying to be another flow that's directed, like it's too much in that direction. It's almost, again, like that, that homeostasis, trying to get, I love this, there's a Buddhist saying that balance is like standing on the head of a pin. And you're little to the left, little to the right. That's it's this subtle movement. And you're right. Sometimes we're so in one direction, pushing, or you had said earlier, what did you say? Hyper, overactive or underactive, that finding that sweet spot sometimes is really feeling it out, Christine, one thing I wanted to ask, how important, because you did say more body-centered, which I love, body-based practices, which I, by the way, seeing, years ago I was a dancer, and then I also did, triathlon, not triathlons, 5Ks and 10Ks, racing and stuff. So always kind of been in touch with the body. But I noticed the shift, even in not just wellness, but spiritual practice, because it was always about the mind, getting out of the body, going somewhere, checking out. And it seems in this phase, if we're going to look at it as the awakening or embodying higher consciousness, or, having more awareness, living more awake, more conscious, or even compassion, as you're saying, it seems the body, even though I'm saying, yes, it's always been important, but I don't feel it's had its place. It's, where we're trying to, a lot of people, a lot of disciplines and studies, pushing the body, activities, push the body, mentally tough, you can do it. What is your perception of the body and the body importance and bringing that into understanding the trauma responses?
I think one of the biggest mistakes that modern medicine made was trying to make a distinction between the mind and the body, because it is so interconnected. And so we'll give people tools like cognitive behavior therapy and say, oh, well, this is a way to change your mind, without recognizing that, those pathways are not always available. And so much of it is just knowing that there are so many pathways. So havening, for example, it changes your delta and theta wave patterns in your brain. So if we measure the energetic output of somebody's mind, we can actually measure energy of the brain or the heart. Doctors have been doing this for decades. So if we measure that, and while a person's doing soothing touch, which is just really gentle brushing on the palms and the shoulders and the face, we can actually measure their gamma waves.
Babies do it, we do it all the time.
Totally. And so this is something that is a body-based practice. You're touching your own palms or your shoulders or your face, and you're changing the brain waves. It's something we can even measure. So like now that we have the modern science, we can say this is fascinating. This really simple practice is something that we can measure where you're using the body to change the brain. And I just think we've made such a mistake in separating them. It's all so necessary. And to say that like there's mental health and physical health and they're different, absolutely not. I mean, when I was practicing family medicine, I would have so many people come to me with stomach problems or a blocked feeling in their throat or muscle tension or even poor diabetic control. And once we started managing trauma responses, everything else came back aligned.
Yeah, so are you seeing more of this understanding is getting more into, let's say, more mainstream medicine?
I wish.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was.
I mean, what I'm noticing is there's more places that I'm getting invited to. So, like, I'm definitely, a physician. I still do family medicine at the refugee clinic, and it's not that I've discounted Western science. I think it does amazing things for people, but we need an and. Like, this is not enough, and it's so reactive. It's dealing with diseases where what we want people to do is to deal with wellness and thriving. And that's where all of these practices come in. So it's not to say that there's something wrong with your body, that you're stuck in a trauma response. That's totally natural. But why haven't you learned the natural ways to shift? And so that's my mission, is just to get this in people's hands. So I'll speak at medical conferences. Like when I was in Europe, I was speaking at the Addiction Medicine Conference and the GP conference in Liverpool for all the family docs in England. And I get to speak on these stages and talk about certain practices, but then I'll apply to different medical conferences that I've been going to for years and years before this, and they're not interested in getting me on the stage. So I think it's one of those things that's going to take time and persistence. And more importantly, once people recognize that it's effective, they're going to start demanding it. They're going to want to know, and they're going to expect people to teach them. So I think the more that I can get the word out on like YouTube or TikTok, the more that people will say to their doctors, like, can you teach me how to do EFT? And that will just be an expectation.
Yeah, I think having, medical doctors that are bridging this, that are bringing this in, and I love that you say the and, because definitely allopathic medicine has its place, and the complementary aspects, and the holistic is that and, is bringing it together. But I do feel like more people like you giving it voice and bridging it, because a lot of people are looking for doctors now that at least embrace this kind of stuff, at least understand it, or aren't not just poo-pooing it, but denigrating it and say, oh, that shouldn't work. And I remember one time I was supposed to get surgery and it's like, oh, you have to be careful because you could be paralyzed. And I was like, I went to my health food store and I'm like, okay, because I had this excruciating pain. I'm like, there's got to be something in here. And then there is a very good store. They have very knowledgeable people. And the guy was like, oh, well, Solgar 7, turmeric and boswellia. And he said, well, this is more for arthritis. It's not really for what you have, but it might work. And you're supposed to have the pain relief after 7 days. That's why it's called Solgar 7. I took one of those little pills. I was talking to my friend on the phone, and like 20 minutes later, I'm like, oh my God. And she's like, what? I go, my pain is completely gone. It's completely gone. Gone.
Wow.
I'm like, so I brought it into the orthopedic surgeon, my next appointment, and what he tells me is, that's impossible. And I said, well, when you're in that much pain, and I go, by the way, I'm just saying, it's not, whatever it is, it works. And then I did research on it, of course, By the way, my acupuncturist loved it. Oh, give me the name to come and tell my patients. The orthopedic surgeons said it's impossible. But I said, well, I was contemplating surgery. That's how much pain I was in, and now I'm not. So whether it's possible or impossible, it works. But the boswellia, which I think is from somewhere, and of course the turmeric also helps. But yeah, I just think the and people being open, and I also feel like having the science, because some of this, holistic health therapists, a lot of this we've known maybe more anecdotally, but to have now the science saying this is why, and codifying it, systemizing it, putting it in some kind of form, it seems like it will get more traction, Christine. As you and other people are coming out, other doctors, it seems like it would be getting more traction at some point.
I think so. I'm definitely sensing a lot more interest, and also because what we're offering isn't sufficient. So, and we don't have like a strong understanding of all of the pathways that are available. Like even you mentioned pain. I've had so many patients when you're stuck in a trauma response, your midbrain, your amygdalas are looking for danger. So that's why we always get triggered, is because there's this pathway that's saying something is going to be threatening and I'm going to respond, and that's a trigger. But you can also have that same pathway activated from inside your own body. And what ends up happening is it will amplify totally normal signals or a pain signal. And so instead of pain at a 3, you'll experience pain at an 8. And it's because your midbrain is saying, oh, I must be in danger. And it turns the volume up and up and up. And it's incredible what you can do with vagus nerve interventions and these somatic strategies that I have in the Modern Trauma Toolkit, because that is the part of the pathway that's broken. And there really is no pill for that. And so few physicians understand, like, it's your vagus nerve telling your brain that your body is sending a signal and it's dangerous, and your brain is perceiving it in that way. Well, you can interrupt that signal in the vagus nerve, you can interrupt that signal in the brain, and you can turn the pain signal down. Wouldn't that be a nicer thing to do instead of taking a pill?
Yeah. Well,
and I sometimes people need both. I don't want to dismiss that.
No, and sometimes that is necessary, the surgery or whatever it is. I've been in a car accident, and I just thought, okay, I there could, listen, if that didn't work, I would have, done something allopathically. But the fact that we have other choices, the other can be, that last choice or result if that's what's needed. And it is that idea of, and it is having the options and understanding your body and what you will do. And I also find over years too, the body, it loves getting into that wonderful sweet spot, that homeostasis. It's you can lovingly retrain your body or train it to be receptive. It will be receptive to healing. It will be receptive to whatever, the good food, the good words, the good, the shifting. It wants to go there. The body, it wants to go there. It likes being, I have found that anyway, it likes being in that place. And I mean, I've seen that as with the medical hypnosis. It really, and you find your own language. You find the language that works for you, your body and mind, and it wants to go there. It wants to live its best life, really that it can with the circumstances. It really does want to optimize, have that optimal health. I just think, to your point, we have to understand that we have a medicine within, and there are things that we can do on a daily or weekly, basis to do that, to augment, our health and wellness.
Yeah.
And it's within us, to do, and then obviously be open to other doctors or practitioners or whatever is needed, or people or community, all of that. But personal loving relationship, I don't know, maybe that's part of the compassion. You were talking about the self-compassion, but I just find that so sacred. It's so honoring of ourself, our body, our life, when we have that kind of relationship with our body, you know, and to some degree body, mind. That's
absolutely.
New learning,
and
Christine, right? It's new learning in a way.
Well, and it's reconnecting. Like in modern times, we have totally disconnected from practices that we've done for centuries. You know, humans used to chant together. We used to dance in circles. We used to plant gardens. We were so in touch with nature and each other in community for so many centuries, and then in very quick modern times, we lost those connections. And so I think us healing as a society isn't just saying, well, I'm going to regulate my nervous system. It's saying, what do I need to reconnect to? So part of the things I talk about are these ancient practices, and like, what did your lineage used to do to stay healthy? Like, find out, explore that.
So what is the correlation? That's interesting, because you're right. We have kind of separated out more. We did do more, whether as a family unit, you know, neighborhood. I remember growing up, it was like neighbors were always at each other's house, coming over. We had dinners together, you know, block parties, barbecues, this at the park, going here, doing this. You know, the idea of the church or the synagogue or spiritual center, community garden. I mean, there really was much more community or group, not just awareness, but activities. And I guess you're right. We have, over the years, gone away from that as kind of the norm.
Yeah. And I don't think that, again, it's like personalizing what's working for you. So for some people, that's what's missing, and that's the practice. It's something spiritual, or it's something community focused, and for other people, it's nature. Like for me, I know you mentioned walking in nature is so good for you, and oh my gosh, like it wasn't until I had a dog companion in my life that I realized walking in nature every day is medicine. And I knew I'd like to go to the mountains and go hiking or skiing or whatever, but I didn't realize that I needed to do it daily. That was a really big awakening for me. So part of it is just learning your own system and what helps you get back to that homeostasis you've been talking about. Or even try to explore what it could feel like, because for so many folks, they've never experienced it. A lot of the patients I had in my family practice, just because they had a lot of childhood exposures and like just a lot of really deep traumas, they had never known what it was like to have a nervous system in the window of tolerance. And it actually can be uncomfortable when you first start to explore it. So for everyone, it's about like figuring out what makes you feel the best, and then trying to find the different ways to organize, like we've said, the day and the week, to try to get yourself in balance, but also having a toolkit for, like, I call this psychological first aid, but like if you do encounter a trigger, or if like something traumatic could happen, and traumas can be like good things as well. Like people think of trauma as like a natural disaster or like a loss, but I mean, getting married is traumatic. It's a huge transition. Having kids is traumatic. Like so many women have PTSD after childbirth, and this is supposed to be this beautiful thing. And so it's like they're afraid or ashamed to talk about it, these very real feelings that happen during the transition, what your body went through, and then these huge relational changes. So it's always good to like plan ahead and say, okay, like this is going to be a time of transition. These are the practices that I'm going to introduce so that I don't get overactive or underactive during that time.
Yeah. I think it's like just knowing what you need. I really feel like in some level, my little aha now, that compassion and understanding yourself and being really, because a lot of what you're saying is really just being present with yourself and your life and, what you're about, however you want to term it, and then responding from that place and having, just really knowing you and honoring you and doing whatever, in a healthy way that it is that you need. Kind of understanding yourself is what is self-understanding there.
Step 1 is noticing, step 2 is shifting, and step 3 is reconnecting. So we can dip into those. Like, it's not linear. Like, we're never done, like you said.
Yeah.
But we can dip into those practices once we start to create our own toolkit, and then we just have so many more flexible options in front of us, and it's not just assuming that the thing we've always done is going to be enough. I mean, I think of all these communities that went through the hurricanes last month. Like, of course you have to figure out your foundational needs like food and water and shelter, but pretty quickly you're going to recognize that there is a change in your nervous system. Like, the world feels less safe. The world feels less certain. And how do you process those heavy changes so that they don't get kind of locked in? And I think that all of these practices are very available to us. Like, our body naturally wants to heal and to restore that equilibrium, but we just haven't been taught how.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. We haven't been taught how, and that's what we so need is how. Just part of it, and I guess I'm going back to that compassion is permission. Like, you are going to need different things at different times, and I have a lot of things in my toolkit, and I'm always learning more. Growing. It's like, I'll tell friends and sometimes clients, sometimes it might be a lot of 3, 4, 5, 6 things or something that you love doing all the time. Your body is or mind is going, not that. No, it's not working. It wants variety. But I'm excited for you, and I'm excited for what you're sharing and teaching and bringing this whole idea of not just the premise, but that it's okay and have more than one thing. It's not going to be just, and also not one size fits all. Because I think that's very helpful and freeing for people. That look, it may not be the same thing as your friend or best friend or your spouse or your partner. It might be something different that you need, that helps you, that regulates you, that brings you back into that peaceful balance or optimal flow.
Yeah.
I think that's.
I think the danger of some practitioners is they'll say, "Oh, you need yoga, or you need breath work, or you need to meditate," and I think the real wisdom is figuring out what we need ourselves. And again, knowing that can change. So sometimes I do need yoga, and other times, no, that's just not it. So I think part of it is just knowing that there's lots and lots of options and ways to restore the nervous system. So in the Modern Trauma Toolkit, I have 40 different activities that people can practice. There's like an audio guide. There's 4 different videos for the somatic or body-based practices. And all I want is to get these tools into people's hands and just say, this is the way that you can build your own toolkit and feel like you have a sense of agency and control. Because so much of what's missing in these times of uncertainty and chaos and change is there's nothing that feels certain. But if there's this one thing, and that's your connection to yourself, your self-compassion, your self-efficacy, your abilities to restore your own mind-body, that can bring you a sense of certainty even when everything around you feels a bit chaotic.
So true. Yeah, it's our ability to do that. Self-love too, self-compassion, self-love. Christine, Christine, let us know where we can find you and the book. I'm sure Amazon and all the places, but also if people want to know more about what you do as well as your book, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Yeah, so the book website is moderntrauma.com, and the website itself kind of gives the vibes of the book. It's really soft and gentle. It's not a book that is intended to trigger anybody. It's written in very easy-to-read language and written in a really compassionate way, because I just knew that was what people need to hear.
Yeah.
So the website also gives you those same vibes. There's a banner across the top with all the buying options, and actually Amazon in the States has had this book on sale for like $12.99 for months. I don't know why, because we actually just reprinted a second edition, so I don't know if they were trying to get rid of first editions. I don't know. But it's a steal of a deal for what you're getting. My website for things like speaking is ChristineGibson.net. And then I also run a company around psychological safety at work, and that is called Safer Spaces Training.
Safer Spaces Training. Okay, great.
Yeah.
And give me your website
and
again.
I'm on socials. Like I'm TikTok Trauma Doc. I'm Christine Gibson.
Right, TikTok and
I have 2 blogs on Substack. So my website connects you to all of that.
Okay, perfect. Well, this has been really kind of peaceful, uplifting, but informative as well, Christine. So I really thank you for coming on and sharing this with us. And I love what you're doing, and I love the whole idea of the modern. I love the modern word in there, descriptor, trauma toolkit. I think the more toolkits people can have and individualize them themselves, I said the better, the better.
Yeah, and I know you're doing, very similar work to try to get tools into people's hands. And I think the more of us that are amplifying these messages and trying to share everything we've learned, the better the collective is going to be able to handle transitions that are coming.
Oh, I so agree. And I feel more and more people are wanting the options. Maybe they don't. This isn't everybody's thing, to do this. So, but they want to utilize those tools. And I think getting those tools out there, because I don't know about you, but I would think the tools are great because the person isn't always going to be there. The people aren't always going to be there. The session is not always going to be available. People may move on. You'll always find support, obviously, but it's very empowering to be able to do something yourself, know yourself, have that self-love, that self-compassion. And, I went for a walk and, oh, my God. Sometimes I'm like, I go for a walk in nature and there's all these birds, and when I'm coming back, I'm like, oh, my God, I really did shift. That does work. I mean, it still amazes me how it really does work.
Yeah, totally.
So anyway, what was the website again? So I'm going to put it in the chat. What was the website?
So moderntrauma.com is the book. The middle piece of the title. So Modern Trauma. And Modern Trauma is actually the name of some of the socials too. My personal, professional website is ChristineGibson.net, and SaferSpacesTraining.com is the workplace psychological safety. So basically, just teaching teams about all of these tools and regulating, because there's a lot of emotional dysregulation at work too.
Oh, gosh, that's a whole other topic. Yes, corporate culture.
Yeah.
Christine, woo, do they need you? Yes, they need this insight and info. Well, this has been wonderful. Come back anytime you'd like to share. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I appreciate you coming on.
Well, and I felt so bad that I missed the time zone the time zones properly, but it was so nice to speak with you for this length of time. There was just so much alignment. Thank you. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah, it was. I took notes. I've learned some things myself that I'm going to put in my own personal toolkit. I'm going to add. So, all right, till next time, you take good care. Shine bright.
I'm getting
Awakenings
See you all
broadcast
next
every
time.
Wednesday, 12 p.m. Pacific Time. Archive shows available on iTunes. For continued awakened conversations and insights, join the Awakenings group on Facebook. And check out Michelle's blog at soulplayground.com. And keep awake.
Seems like there's more identity theft in the news every day.
Another major healthcare breach was reported today, resulting in the exposure of
now 1 in 4 consumers have been a victim of identity.
That's because there are endless places that could accidentally expose you to identity theft, in a breach, or simply by mistake. LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year with promo code NEWS at LifeLock.com. Terms apply.